and we commend his spirit into your keeping, O Lord. Reverend, this gathering has not been authorized by the Canyon Ridge Estates HOA Board. The deceased has a balance of $9,500 in unpaid fines, and this service cannot proceed until the estate settles what is owed. I'm also citing a noise violation under Section 8.1. Homeowners Association President Beatrice Kensington had filed $9,500 in unenforceable fines against Mr. Arthur Pendleton of 4412 Desert Mirage Way. This happened over 3 years. She cited lawn heights, exterior paint tone, and noise disturbances from a 70-year-old man who lived quietly and entirely alone. She had threatened repeatedly to place a lien on his deed with the Maricopa County Recorder's Office. She demanded the balance be cleared before the end of each quarter. She had attended every HOA meeting where he pushed back. She matched every objection he raised with another violation notice the following week. What she didn't know was that every fine she had ever filed against him was heavily documented, photographed, and cross-referenced against the actual bylaws. It was done by a son who had been quietly preparing a massive lawsuit for 18 months. She didn't know the community gathering she was about to disrupt was a funeral attended by 40 witnesses. Kicking a man's coffin in front of that many people was going to end her presidency before the service was even over. Mr. Pendleton, 70, had lived at 4412 Desert Mirage Way in the Canyon Ridge Estates subdivision of Mesa, Arizona, for 22 years. He had bought the house with his late wife and raised his 3 sons inside it. He maintained it through 2 decades of brutal Arizona summers with pure, quiet discipline. He was a man who took immense pride in what he owned without needing absolutely anyone to tell him to do so. He was retired from a long career in civil engineering. He was still sharp, still physically capable of mowing his own lawn, and completely unwilling to be told what to do. He certainly refused to be told what to do by someone he did not respect. He mowed every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. It was the same routine, the same careful straight lines across the front yard, and the same edged trim along the sidewalk. His lawn had never once been a genuine problem for anyone on Desert Mirage Way. The first fine arrived on a Tuesday in April. It cited grass height exceeding the Canyon Ridge Estate's maximum of 3 inches as measured along the front border of his property. The measurement Beatrice Kensington had recorded on the official notice was exactly 3.5 inches. Mr. Pendleton went outside with his own tape measure. He checked the grass in 5 separate spots along the front border. He carefully recorded measurements between 2.8 and 3.1 inches. He photographed all 5 measurements and wrote his findings in a letter to the HOA board. He hand-delivered it to the community office on Saguaro Boulevard the following morning. Then he attended the next quarterly board meeting. He said exactly what he thought about it in front of every resident in the room. Beatrice Kensington, 57, had been HOA president of Canyon Ridge Estates for 8 years. She had built her position on the board through a combination of procedural manipulation. She also relied on the simple fact that most residents found it easier to pay a fine than to fight one. She was not accustomed to being challenged publicly. She was certainly not accustomed to being challenged by someone who showed up with photographs and a tape measure. She looked at Mr. Pendleton across the meeting room at the community center. She smiled, the kind of smile that means absolutely nothing good. In the following week, she filed 3 more violation notices against 4412 Desert Mirage Way. The dispute had found its shape, and neither of them was going to be the one to end it first. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing exactly where you're tuning in from. And if you believe that harassing a 70-year-old man over half an inch of grass is shameful, hit that like and subscribe button and join us here on Karen Conflict. Beatrice did not slow down after that first board meeting. She actually sped up. Over the following 6 months, she filed 14 separate violation notices against his property. There were noise complaints against a man who lived alone and kept his television at a volume his neighbors had never once mentioned. There were aesthetic violations citing the color of his front door, which had not changed in 11 years. There were parking infractions for a vehicle parked on his own driveway at a compliant angle. The fines ranged from $200 to $600 each. The total accumulated against his deed climbed past $9,500 before the end of the year. Mr. Pendleton attended every quarterly board meeting and pushed back on every single one. He came fully prepared with his evidence. He brought his photographs, his tape measure readings, his written letters, and his 22 years of immaculate property records. They showed a home that had never once been a genuine problem for the Canyon Ridge Estates community. He was not rude, and he was not aggressive. He was simply a 70-year-old man who knew exactly when something was wrong and completely refused to pretend otherwise. The other residents in those meetings watched him and said nothing. Most of them had already learned that saying nothing was easier than becoming Beatrice's next target. Mr. Pendleton never paid a single fine. He didn't pay $1 of the $9,500 that had accumulated against his deed. He also refused to pay any of the additional fines that kept arriving in his mailbox through the winter and into the spring. He told his son Julian during a phone call in February that he had no intention of paying money he did not owe. He certainly wouldn't pay it to a woman he did not respect. He boldly stated that if she wanted to take him to court, she was more than welcome to try. Julian, a civil litigation attorney based in Phoenix, gave him strict advice. He told his father to keep every notice and photograph absolutely everything. Mr. Pendleton calmly told him he already was. The fines kept coming through the spring and summer. Beatrice escalated her language in each subsequent notice. There were specific references to lien filings and county assessor involvement. There were references to foreclosure proceedings that she had no legitimate legal basis to initiate. She couldn't do it against a property with no mortgage and no genuine debt. Mr. Pendleton filed each notice in a folder he kept on his kitchen table. He called Julian every single time a new one arrived. Then, in late August, Mr. Pendleton did not answer his phone when Julian called on a Sunday evening. A neighbor found him the very following morning. He had passed away peacefully at home overnight. He was 70 years old, and he had not paid a single fine. He had not given Beatrice Kensington one single moment of satisfaction in 3 years of trying to break him. The neighborhood sincerely mourned him. People brought food to his sons. Flowers appeared on the porch of 4412 Desert Mirage Way without anyone organizing it. The community center on Saguaro Boulevard went quiet in the way places go quiet when someone genuinely good is no longer in them. Beatrice Kensington sent a letter to the estate the following week, aggressively demanding immediate payment of the outstanding balance. The funeral service for Mr. Pendleton was held on a Thursday afternoon at Mesa Heritage Chapel on Main Street in Maricopa County. 43 people filled the room. There were neighbors from Desert Mirage Way, former colleagues, and family friends. All 3 of his sons were sitting quietly in the very front row. Julian sat closest to the aisle with his hands folded and his jaw set tightly. It was the look of a man holding himself together through discipline rather than ease. The service had been running for 20 minutes when the door at the back of the room opened. Beatrice Kensington walked right in, wearing her HOA lanyard. She stood at the back of the room for a moment. Then she moved toward the front, clipboard in hand, and announced something in a very loud voice. She said it loud enough for every person in that chapel to hear. She claimed the gathering constituted a violation under Canyon Ridge Estates community standards. She said the assembly had not been authorized by the HOA board. She stated the service could not proceed on the grounds that the deceased had been a hostile resident. She mentioned his outstanding balance of $9,500 in unpaid fines that had not been resolved by the estate. The entire room went completely silent. Then she walked right toward the coffin and actually kicked it. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Julian Pendleton was on his feet before the sound of the impact had even finished echoing in the quiet room. He crossed the distance between his seat and where Beatrice was standing in exactly 2 strides. He took her by the arm firmly. He walked her straight to the back of the chapel, pushed her through the door and out onto the sidewalk outside. He did not raise his voice once during any of it. He closed the door firmly behind her, turned to the room, nodded once at the officiant, and calmly sat back down in his seat in the front row. Someone called the police from outside. Someone else was already filming from the exact moment Beatrice had walked in. The funeral service continued. Mr. Pendleton was finally buried with the dignity he deserved. Julian made 3 specific phone calls before the reception was even over. The Maricopa County District Attorney's Office received 3 separate complaints against Beatrice Kensington. They all arrived within 48 hours of the funeral. One was from Julian Pendleton, filed the same evening. One was from Mesa Heritage Chapel, citing the massive disruption of a funeral service. The third was from a neighbor who had filmed the entire incident from the moment Beatrice walked through the door. The footage clearly showed absolutely everything. It showed the lanyard, the clipboard, the horrible announcement, and the sickening kick. It was clear, time-stamped, and had been watched over 2 million times online. Arizona Revised Statutes 13-2904 makes disorderly conduct at a funeral a severe criminal offense. The kick to the coffin added a criminal mischief charge right on top of it. Beatrice was charged with both within 10 days of the service. She was photographed at the Maricopa County Courthouse in the same pressed blouse she had worn to every HOA meeting. Except this time, there was absolutely no clipboard and no lanyard. Julian filed a massive civil lawsuit the very next week. It named Beatrice personally and the HOA board as a collective body, cited 3 years of completely fabricated violation notices. It cited the harassment of an elderly resident, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the funeral disruption. It framed the funeral disruption as the culminating act of a sustained campaign of abuse that the board had enabled through consistent inaction. The filing included every violation notice Mr. Pendleton had ever received. It had every photograph he had taken, every letter he had written, and every board meeting he had attended. It proved he had to constantly dispute fines that should never have been issued in the first place. The HOA board removed Beatrice from the presidency unanimously. They issued a public statement the same day expressing their deepest condolences to the Pendleton family. It was far too late for the statement to help them, and they absolutely knew it. The civil judgment finally came down 4 months later. Beatrice was ordered to pay massive damages and legal fees. The sum the court described reflected the extreme severity of what she had done to a good man. She had harassed a man over half an inch of grass in his final years and refused to leave his funeral in peace. She sold her home on Desert Mirage way before the year was out. Julian Pendleton mowed his father's lawn the following Saturday morning. He kept the exact same straight lines and the same careful edge trim along the sidewalk. Nobody came to measure it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that some people carry their dignity all the way to the end, share this video with someone who needs it. And if you have a story about an elderly neighbor, a parent, or a loved one who is targeted by an HOA, drop it in the comments. We will tell that story. See you on the next one, right here on Karen Conflict.